Hello and welcome to the third podcast of the year. In this podcast, we'll be talking about why Asian players have fallen off the radar. Just before we get started, please may you head over to our Spotify account and also YouTube to follow us. Let's get started.
Welcome everyone to this week's edition of the FCCA podcast. We're joined as usual by Raj Chowdhury, who's head of first class cricket. We've got Darren Jordan, who's a coach at FCCA cricket for a number of years. How many years, Darren, have you been coaching at FCCA for?
7 or 8, I think, Raj, isn't it? Something like that.
We're very lucky to be joined by professional cricketer and former Sussex County cricket player Abby Scandi. Morning, Abby.
Good morning. How you doing?
All good, thanks. All good. And then we're joined this week with Krishan Nai, who's an old boy of Worth School and the Old Worth captain. He's been involved in pathway cricket with Surrey and currently plays cricket in the Sussex Premier League. And we're joined by his dad, which Jag Nai. Morning, Jag.
Morning.
Cool. So this week we're going to be talking about pathway cricket and specifically pathway cricket for Asians. Approximately 35% in pathways county cricket at junior level is made from Asian and other backgrounds. However, when it gets to a professional, the level drops to approximately 3% of Asians involved in professional county cricket. So this week we're going to be discussing the reasons for that and how that could possibly change going forward. Raj, should we start with you?
Before we go into this discussion and getting into the causes and how we can get it right, I've got a few points I think we need to keep in mind, and this is just to see the bigger picture, right, and address the cultural difference in the first bit. Now, the Asian people who have moved, and that includes me, the biggest reason is what? Why have we left the place where we have grown up, the place where we have lived all our lives, the place where we have got our friends and family, our parents, and moved? What's the main reason? It's definitely not the British weather, I can assure you that. And majority of the cases, unless someone is facing persecution in some other countries or something terrible, it is the exchange rate. Okay, number one. Secondly, the Asian mindset is such that if our children want to do something, we will back it 100% or more till when we find out that they're doing it properly. That's two. We don't want to go and do the stuff, the ancillary stuff that is involved in a cricket club generally in England. Okay, like making the tees, scoring, helping with the ground, that sort of stuff. Because why? Because we don't have to do that stuff back home.
Give us your experience of you had when you came through a pathway system.
Right, cool. So I'll say going through the pathway, particularly, I mean, I'm just gonna exclude myself from this, but even just watching young Asian boys go through the pathway, the first thing obviously you see is generally that they're less developed physically, and obviously that you could say that's due to genetic factors, but I think that there's also an issue of they don't have the information that they need on nutrition and working out, and I don't feel like there's enough of a push from their parents on that side of it. I think there's too much focus on the skill side of it, because I think that the county coaches, they're not going to pick you unless you're a sufficient athlete and you can go and you can turn those ones to twos. I think that like there needs to be more of an emphasis on physicality. as a whole. And I also think on the mental side, I think a lot of the Indian boys have been mothered a bit too much. So it sounds like they're very like soft and quiet. So I think there does need to be more of an emphasis on that mental side to almost get them to believe in themselves a bit more. But yeah, that's from my side.
That's an interesting kind of almost stereotype that you mentioned about the Asian boys being perceived as not having the same physicality, because for me, almost parallels and reverse this stereotype about kind of black players, which I've found and I've definitely seen other people who've reported kind of feeling the same thing, which is hard to quantify sometimes, but it's just that idea that when you do a skill or kind of a white player does a skill for black players, you see this in football a lot, and the cricket sometimes as well. It's perceived as being they did it because of their physique or because of their their perceived extra strength or speed or something like that. Whereas if a white player performs the same skill, sometimes it can be perceived as because of their ability, or their technique or something like that. It's interesting, that contrast, and how it kind of shows that in general the stereotypes do more harm than good. The overall, if you want to be picked on the merits of your kind of ability, if you imagine a coach trying to read in too much to the background of a player and say, oh, they haven't got the necessary athletic development yet, or because of where they're from in the world, that kind of takes a lot away from judging the player on the basis of what they've got in front of them. But I think the point you made, Raj, as well, about like the whole what point along the development pathway someone is, depending on how old they are and what point they actually maybe there's a later catch up for some of the Asian boys who catch up with their physical development a bit later. But if they're already out of the system by kind of 17, 18, then it's kind of too late at that point. So I think it's a really interesting conversation that I've not really heard people talk about it in much detail. But I think make it very clear.
I mean, I will 100% agree with what Krishna said. And one of the things I have noticed is till now, so I've been coming to this country since 89 and I started living here from 2002. And I have not seen one Asian player till now who has come to me or I've seen him in the system who is physically even up to the average level if he was growing up back home. When's going on, because you got to change buses and the whole system is such that you develop a bit of physicality and fight in you. But contrast that to the boy who's coming to school here in the back of dad's Mercedes and gets dropped off, and he's on his phone or looking at a video or whatever, and he just gets dropped off back. So there is no physicality, no physical involvement, which I think is a major setback. But having said that, the skill levels are high. So they will catch up, but it is quite ignorant from most people.
While listening to India v Australia on the radio last night, I heard Stuart Clark was talking about the New South Wales pathway, which he thinks is a waste of time. And he was saying things exactly like this. He says at 13, 14, 15, they go for the physically developed kids who can launch boundaries, who can throw it further, who can bowl it faster. And he says they lose so many of the more skilled younger kids at that age group. And by the time the big guys have got to 16, 17, their skill sets aren't good enough to take them any further. And so I think, judging from what he said last night, this isn't just an English issue. I think it's probably an Australian issue as well.
I think that's a really important point. I think that because the pathway now pretty much ends at like under 19, under 18, if you could maybe extend that to like under 21, under 23, you could have, it gives a chance for those boys that are less developed to develop those skills, to develop physically. And maybe that could increase the skill of the players just as a whole throughout county cricket.
That's a really it's an interesting suggestion. I agree with you. I think that should definitely be something that is the longer you allow players to kind of keep developing within the game. I mean, I was lucky enough to go through the university MCCU kind of system, which was massive for me because at 18, I definitely don't think I was ready to move into the professional game, and having 3 years like away at university to carry on playing and carry on developing was huge. And I think there were a lot of players who went through that system, but and so I think the ECB and whatever need to keep funding it or keep finding ways to fund it. But to bring it back to slightly that question about earlier on in the development system and who gets picked at the younger ages, I think in our conversation before, Raj, you mentioned something really interesting about how the coaches kind of sometimes are pick on measurables, and you can measure lots of aspects of like strength and speed and all of that, but sometimes the skill is harder to measure. And I don't know. I thought you made that point really well to me, so I don't know if you wanted to share it again.
Yes, I think I agree with that point as well from Raj, because when you're a coach, you can be you haven't got to put your neck on the line for anyone. You can just go back to the measurables, like you said, Abby. What can you measure? And that's who you can hand into the head of academy or head of cricket or whatever, and that's your job done. You're taking more of a risk if you're taking a punt on a 14-year-old batter who might not be strong or fit or quick, but he can bat, but you can't measure that because when you're sort of 14, 15, you're not really looking at averages or bowling averages or whatever. You're looking at that when you're 18, 19, 20.
I think you are a perfect case, not an Asian case, but you were personally a perfect case for this. But to understand this, you got to again step back a bit, because you got to see. Now I'll come and I'll show you the difference. What does the ex player do here in England? Because we got to understand the profile of the guy who's making that decision and binning a player. Okay. So what does the ex player do? The Chris Adam or the Abhishek Andy or the Chris Nash or the Darren Stephen or the Vince Wells, what are they going to do in England if they come off the game, right? So they have got three choices. Either they make so much contact during their playing days that they'll go into a business or do some other work. They will be completely off cricket. The second choice is they will come into the pro game at the high end. Okay. The third choice is they will go to a private school. Okay, because that has got 5 months holiday and they can do their own stuff outside that period. So what is the profile of the person who is coaching in the county age group pathways and all that? So that person is likely to be someone who's played a bit of cricket for the academy or played 2 or 3 second team games in August when there was an injury or something like that. And now he has come to a stage where he doesn't have a quality education to fall back on, because the county age group thing doesn't pay you really well. Okay. It's almost the age group coaching, if you manage a match, is almost like McDonald's rate of pay.
Jack, would you like to come in there and share your experiences of
So yeah, as I said, we came here when he was about 12 or 13, and we went through Sussex trials, and he managed to get to the second team for that age group, but he never managed to get, despite trying for 3-4 years, into the first team. Even though, as I said, I've never played the game before, but I'm just judging the ability based on what I'm told by people who are like Raj and others who know better than I do. So I think that was a bit disheartening. In fact, the age of, I think, 15 or 16, we went for trials to Surrey, and how many people there were in those trials, but Christian was the only one who was selected to play for Surrey then. it's unfortunate that when he was selected and played a few games, he didn't quite perform to his ability. So that's comes to my second point, where even though he had the ability, he probably didn't have enough of an opportunity to prove himself. So I think, those are my 2 points. There's a third point, actually. Generally speaking, I think, as you know, this is not just for Christian, but generally, I think, as we know, cricket is an elite game, just like golf and rugby, and it tends to be played in more in private schools than a government school. So when I came here, Christian went to a government school and he joined the local club. But I know for sure that he would never have got to this level had he not gone to a private school. And of course, I'm a professional, but there's still a limit to how much one can afford to send someone to private school for, to try and further their cricket game. So the only reason he managed to get to a private school was because he got a scholarship, thanks to Raj recommending him. So the point I'm getting at is, I think you may have many people of a BAME background who have ability, and when they're young, they can join a club and play cricket, etc. But to get to a level where you have a solid foundation, it makes a big difference if you have been to a private school, if you know what I'm saying.
Just to add to that, when I was at Hazelwick's Academy, which is the state school, I was there for about 2.5 years. And if you ask how many training sessions I had 1 half-an-hour training session the whole 2.5 years. And they barely have cricket nets there. They're just like mossed up and everything. So in that environment, how can anyone practice? Like, yes, you're going to club nets, but how productive are club nets? Like you have to train outside of that. And if you don't have the financial means to go to private school, you're not going to get to that level. Because when I moved to Worth, we were training at lunch pretty much every day, or like 3 times a week. And then you'd have after school training. So you're constantly working on your game and improving. So going to private school is a big advantage. So I think that when you have a lot of the Asian boys who won't go to private school, then obviously that's a disadvantage. So it's not just Asian boys, that's everyone. When you don't have that advantage to go to private school.
Bring DJ as well, because Darren, you've got a lot of experience coaching in England as well, haven't you?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
You've been to India, you've been to Dubai, and obviously you've coached within clubs in England a lot. How do you think your experience of that? Did you agree with what Raj was sort of saying?
Well, the first thing I noticed in India, they don't have any time for any sort of social cricket whatsoever at all. So what I think you'll find, or anyone who's been to India, if a kid's not going to make it at any sort of level, by the time he's 15, 16, he does something else. He doesn't play cricket again. Is that right, Raj? I believe
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And
the counties, or which is the states, do not spend a pie on people who are not playing seriously, right? If you play seriously, you're in the system, which is like the counties run the Premier League and the next division. That is it. That's where the counties put in the money. Counties don't have time for someone playing tennis ball cricket on the street, which is social cricket, or anyone who wants to play socially. You can go and play your cricket there. No one is bothered. You can play 1-ball game, you can play 10-over game, you can play only toss game. No worries. You can do whatever you want to do, but don't mess with actual cricket.
Yeah, and exactly right. And we do seem very keen on, well, Sky Sports started this, I believe, once they took over showing cricket in this country after 2005, I think. And they throw a lot of money at cricket in this country, but in my view, they throw too much of it at participation level and not excelling level, which is, I mean, I may be wrong, but that's how I see it. And that's been the way it is from about 15 years, I think.
Mm. So they're getting people through the door, but what they're being delivered is not of a standard that's going to produce a player for the long term.
Exactly. So you have it's fine having loads of kids playing softball cricket when they're 9, 10, 11, but by 14, 15, 16, when they're playing hardball cricket and suddenly they've got kids who can put the ball past their chin and they don't have the skill set to deal with that, they think, oh, stuff this for a game of so I'm going to go and play Fortnite or something or find something else to do.
This
And
is
we
what I
lose
signed
loads
up
of
for. Yeah, I didn't sign up for having a ball go past my head or, you know. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Can I come in on that? There's so many interesting kind of topics that have been brought up, and I kind of think that some of these ideas coalesce around the idea of there being more pathways than just kind of a singular route. One, which I can't agree more with what Christian and Jag were saying about the private school system being so much of the funnel through which every player has to have, well, not every player, but the vast majority of players get filtered because there's so many more opportunities there compared to if you go to a state school. And that again is I think a lot of cricket clubs and a lot of the country, not just kind of in this area and not just in Sussex, have relied a lot on the strength of the products of the private school system because they know that those players who go into the private schools can get more hours of cricket a week. So the counties have ended up relying, a significant proportion of their players end up coming from those private schools because of those opportunities. But I think that like you said, needs to be more pathways whereby if you're not in that system, you can actually still continue playing. And the question you had is to the quality of the coaches at the age group level as well, and what their incentives are to, and how they're going to earn a living in one sense, but also, be able to have the necessary experience needed to be able to pick the players who are going to succeed in the longer term. Obviously that's that's a difficult job to do, but having the quality of person, they also have to kind of be paid at a reasonable level to be able to, for that position, to attract the right kind of the quality of person to want to be a kind of age group coach or kind of community coach. And that payment model, like I said, in this area, and I don't know if it's the whole UK or if it's kind of how it works in Sussex, seems again quite limited. Like you said, £25,000 for a player to hit enough balls to basically have a chance of making it as professional cricket. Well, that's instantly going to cut down a huge range of people who are going to be able to afford that to progress through a professional career. So really, I don't know whether it's looking at the things that are going to be more accessible, whether it's looking at schools or looking at what clubs offer. But clearly, there's a real issue, especially around the number of pathways and the quality of the number of coaches and the quality of coaches for kids wherever they're from in the country to be 6 years old and be like, I want to play professional cricket, and not have it be like the only way you can do that is by going to a private school at some point and paying for all of this coaching. That's the only way. There should be some way where they can, grow up, play a lot of cricket, with either their friends at school, or their friends at club level, and kind of have enough quality in the amount of training, or whatever, that they're able to progress and still have a way into the system, even if they only actually develop the skills and the physicality or whatever it is, when they're a little bit older. That's definitely what it seems to be coalescing around. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah, Habby, you remember I was running your age group and with Chris Waller, and you turned around and you said to us, what do you guys do the whole day? You come in, you have a coffee, you set up some cones, do some warm-ups, hit some catches, and have some more coffee, and that's your day done. Now, I'll come to that. You were 100% right.
You're watching us the most of the day with a coffee in hand, and we're like, what are they doing?
But I tell you that we used to get paid, I'll give you the numbers also, £65 per day for, what was it, a 12-hour day? Right? That is below McDonald's wages. Right? Now, no person who has played half decent cricket in this country, right, would go and do that job. Now, you will ask me now, why were you doing that job? Because if you do that job, then you get a lot of winter stuff which supplements your income. That's why you did.
It also wasn't yours and Chris's sort of first it was your second job, wasn't it? You know, you had other
Yeah.
commitments going on, so you
You're
weren't
not
relying on
going
that.
to be doing it full time. You cannot.
Mm.
So Chris had a job at Ardingly. I had a job at Worth, and we were doing that. And then that, obviously, if you're doing age group coaching, parents don't bother in seeing how good or bad you are. They want you to coach their kids because they think they're going to have an easy life. Right? They try to bypass the system that way. Now, some coaches will do it, some coaches won't. So, but the key thing is, I'll tell you this from my own experience. I was told by a former school I used to work with, if you want more hours, why don't you go and get a hockey coaching certificate, right? Only thing I know about hockey is it's played by 11 men, right? So I went for this coaching
All
course,
women.
right? I went for this coaching course up in Cheshire for 3 days or 4 days. It was a level 1 course, and I got a certificate. I went back to where I was, the school I was. I did, I think, 4 weeks of that. I was so embarrassed, I can't tell you, because people were taking the mick out of me, right? And it's obviously going to happen. And that was never happening when I'm doing cricket, because I know what I'm talking about. Here, I don't have a clue. But Mr. Faulkner, he's at Worth School, who's a head of hockey, right? And he has played international hockey, has got the same coaching badge as me. How can that be right? It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. That guy is an artist with a hockey stick. And here I am, know only that 11 people play hockey. And that's what has happened. You've given out certificates left, right, and center because it ticks a box. It's a joke. My mom can go and get a certificate of cricket coaching here. But in 93, 94, when we started the coaching pathway here, I did my level 4. Level 1 was a 7-day course. It did cricket, not cone touching. It's a joke. And the joke has happened more and more since 2008. The moment IPL started, people felt left out. I haven't caught the bus, IPL bus. Money has gone to India. We need to do something. Oh, how do we make it so popular? You go to any academy in India, they don't teach power hitting to 10-year-olds. They don't teach rotating singles to 11-year-olds. They teach basics, they teach fundamentals. But obviously, if my equivalent of a hockey coach in cricket will teach power hitting at 10 because he is clueless. Like I was with the hockey certificate. So coming to Krishan's point of doing it in clubs, what's the point? You go to a premier club net. Who's bowling? You've got 7 bowlers, 3 third teamers, 2 fourth teamers, 1 first teamer. 1 ball hits the bamboo pole, 1 ball hits the wheels of the net, and 3rd ball is a yorker. How can you practice like that and become a cricketer? And that too 1 day a week or 2 days a week. That's what TV serials and soaps, not to become a cricketer.
No, it's a valid point. But yeah, I think it's a tricky question to answer. Like, how do you actually improve the standard of the coaching, but also like to get because you said like earlier that the numbers, that the money in the game, the ACB as a whole, are putting much more into participation. Because they're trying to get more kids access to cricket. So like Christian was saying, half an hour in 2 years, and for the ECB that ticks a lot of that ticks the box of like trying to get more people to play. But if you think about the few coaches that there are in the county, or in any county, and they have to go across hundreds of schools, they can only afford to basically do a couple of hours like per student in order to give as many students as possible the experience of playing cricket. The difference between that and actually getting the players who are keen to carry on playing kind of into clubs and into into wider participation is massive. And the amount of resources that need to invest clearly there's a lot more.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this series. Part 2 of the Asian drop-off will be out in a few weeks' time. Just before you go, please watch the trailer for next Sunday. Thanks for watching.
So it wasn't Test match cricket of the highest quality. It does concern me. I know this is a small sample size of 1 day, 1 innings, but Test match batting in particular around the world at the moment really concerns me. As Bumble and Kumar have said, are people preparing mentally rightly for a Test match innings bat long, value your wicket. Even the way people talk about certain people that do that. I brought up Pujara on commentary. It's almost like, well, that's boring. We don't want that anymore. Who blocks it? We've got to show it. No, your batsman set it up. You can't win again on the first ball.
Actually just do a lot of pretty basic boring stuff, to be honest. I get underarms, just making sure that my back path's coming through nice and straight.